Hey guys, good to see you. Welcome to our series on special education concerns. I am Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. So we're super excited today. We have a guest on who is a special educator, Angela Tucker. Welcome. She's a
Hello.
special educator in Texas, and even more importantly, she's a CTVI, a certified teacher of the visually impaired. And so Angela reached out to me. We had been in meetings before with a kiddo that I serve, that she serves, and she reached out to me because she has some concerns in her district about a number of things, how she was treated, the implementation of IDEA, denials of FAPE, and so Angela, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so kind of tell us what's been going on with your district.
It is no longer my district, but I was working for Bryan Independent School District in Bryan, Texas. And after I spoke up to the special ed directors about my concerns about some of the schools and how they were treating our blind students, I was not renewed for my contract was not renewed for next year. So which I feel was completely retaliatory. I've worked with blind and visually impaired students in 3 states for over 20 years, and all of a sudden, I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, so kind of tell us, and that's great specificity, and obviously kiddos with a vision impairment or blindness, or what we would call LID, low incident disabilities. So
Mhm.
I think in America we're running low on special educators and teachers. So you have this is what you have your degree in from Utah. How did you kind of backing up a little bit for Bryan ISD? How did you become to work at Bryan ISD?
So I moved here with my husband 4 years ago from San Diego, and because he was going to attend grad school, and I took a job as a life skills class teacher for Bryan ISD because I needed a job at the time, and it was what they had open. So I had worked for Bryan ISD for a couple of years before this, and then last year the teacher of the visually impaired came to me and said, "I'm retiring and I would really like you to apply for my job." And I said, "Absolutely. I mean, this is what I went to school to do and this is where my heart is." So I applied, got hired for that position, and I started at the beginning of this school year at the 2024-25 school year as the teacher of the visually impaired, and the rest is sort of history. So
Right. So just sharing for our listeners, or if you're watching this video, I'm sure somebody shared it with you. The certified teacher of the visually impaired has quite a heavy load, just like the teacher of deaf and hard of hearing students or a teacher of students that are deaf blind. And part of that is adaptation of the product. So the law says nationally, if you are a third grade student and we're doing President's Week this week, that every student in the class is required to receive their educational product at the same time. And so, what happens for teachers of the visually impaired? And I'm sure that you had more than a handful of kids on your caseload. Is that accurate?
yes, I had, well, about 40 kids
Okay.
on my caseload. Yes.
Wow. So I guess you didn't have lunch breaks probably. So
No.
so for a teacher of the visually impaired, they have to adapt the instrument. So instead of obviously a student that has a visual impairment may or may not be able to see a worksheet that a third grade teacher puts down. And so for each content area, up to 7 classes when we're in junior high or high school, then that teacher of the visually impaired has to get those units of study or the work ahead of time. Sometimes we'll say 2 weeks, 6 weeks ahead of time so that you can adapt those materials. And so were you adapting materials in your district?
Well, I was. So the problem was that I was not given any materials to adapt by the gen ed teachers. I had several meetings with with principals at the schools, with the gen ed teachers, with parents asking, "Hey, I mean, I need time to be able to do this." I had a blind kindergarten student who needed everything adapted, and I only got, over the course of the year, I got 11 things to adapt for him throughout the course of the year. I had so many different meetings that I called about this saying, "Hey, this is not working out. We need to do what we can for this kiddo." And they just kind of blew it off, and they chose to instead give him an iPad to listen to during the day.
And the
So
iPad was with units of
it
study
was
for history, math,
no, absolutely
English.
no, it was, it was songs on YouTube, it was movies on Netflix, it was yeah, it was just entertainment.
So that's a complete egregious denial of FAPE, correct?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
when you address this with leadership, whoever leadership is, how did that go?
It did not go over well. So I addressed it with leadership. I did speak up with the parent about it because the parent came to me and said, "Why doesn't he have homework?" And I said, "Because I haven't been given anything to adapt for him." So I mean, I gave him plenty of activities to work on at home, but she wanted to know like why he wasn't getting the same things that the school was getting. So when I said that I hadn't been given anything from the school, this was back in the fall, my direct supervisor called me into a meeting and told me that I should not be communicating with the parents because they were going to think that they were being denied FAPE. And I said, "Well, they are being denied FAPE." And she told me that she did not want me communicating with the parents like that again.
So did you think about reaching out to the special ed director?
So I did, and I met with the special ed director. I've met with the
Okay.
special ed director and with the assistant director over a dozen times over the school year.
Oh, a
Mhm.
dozen. That seems to be a
Over a
lot.
dozen. Mhm,
Yeah.
over a dozen times, and all of it was just swept under the rug. I reached out to the Region 6 specialist and asked for some help. He was gracious and came out and helped me with the student, and I got written up for inviting him to our school district without getting pre-approval for it. So it was like little things like that, which
Right.
I
And
didn't
so,
know I needed to get prior authorization to invite somebody to help me.
yeah, so the Texas Education Agency has 20 ESCs,
Mhm.
educational
Yes.
service centers. They're like little hubs that help our educators and administrators. They're great resources. So, how were if you were not being allowed to have, adaptive materials, visual aids, all those sorts of things for, career technology, assistive technology, compensatory skills, then how could you implement the IEP with fidelity?
I mean, the short answer is I could not.
Okay.
I did my best to do what I could just kind of on my own time and out of my own pocket, but the students were not getting what they deserved.
And so when did you ever talk to general ed teachers and special ed teachers? What did they say when you asked for, materials that you could adapt?
I did. So at the one elementary school that I asked for, they kept saying, "Oh, okay, we'll send them to you. We'll send them to you," and then it just never happened. I finally got after 3 requests in ARD meetings. I finally got approval to work with the student in resource and to send him into resource time so that he was at least getting some kind of education, because when I did all of my assessments, all my evaluations, he was testing on a level of about a 3-year-old. So I mean, this was a kiddo who I did my ECC assessment on him, and he was functioning as about a 3-year-old. So I said, let's get him into resource. Let's start working on that, and I'll work with the resource teacher to adapt some lessons. The resource teacher said to me, and I quote, "Well, I don't have time. I'm in grad school, so he can start resource next year."
Oh,
This was April 2nd that I was told that. So he missed out on um, about almost 2,000 minutes of resource time.
and so did the school address that with the parents, or do parents even know?
So the parent in this situation, the parent only knew because I told the parent,
Okay.
but I told the director of SPED, I told the assistant director, I told the principal, I told ECR Region 6, I told TEA, I told, pretty much everybody that I could tell. And it was just all swept under the rug. I know that mom in that meeting when we agreed to resource time, I know that mom waived her right to the waiting period for and wanted resource to start immediately.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I can't say what happened, but when I went into the program to look at the paperwork, it had been changed and it had been put in there that mom did not waive her waiting period. So, and I mean, I know what I heard. And I know what
Right.
mom told me, but
Right.
it was changed to make it look like we didn't owe him as much as we actually did.
Right. And so was this just like isolated to one campus? Was it somewhat what did it impact all of your students?
So this particular student was the biggest issue, and this was at one specific campus, but this was all throughout the district. This was every time I tried to get help from leadership, it was, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have the training. It was one thing after another to try to get, I mean, and this was going from babies in ECI all the
Yeah.
way up to 22 years old. I mean, it was spread out, all the students. I mean, I can't think of, well, other than, students who had advocates, I
Yeah.
can't think of another student who was getting everything that they
And so
needed.
and so why is it obviously I'm an advocate and I believe that people should get an advocate even if it's just somebody else that can come and listen to you, right? Because it's a high stakes meeting and high stakes
Mhm.
outcome, right? And so why do you think it's different when a family has an advocate? Why do you think the district responds differently?
Oh, because I think the district gets scared. They're scared that they're going to have to cough up a bunch of money. They're scared that they're going to be all over the news. They're scared that they're going to get in trouble for not following the law. They know that what they're doing is wrong,
Okay.
and they know that the advocate is going to call them out on it.
Right. And so we're for all of your kiddos, no matter what the acuity of the vision impairment is, right? So a vision impairment, and I used to think when I first started this process 100,000 years ago, I assumed it was just my own bias that if you had a vision impairment, you didn't have any vision, right? And so obviously
Mhm.
a vision impairment is on a continuum. So if a student meets eligibility for vision impairment, there is something that you're going to have to do to adapt the material, whether it's make it a bigger font, something like that. But you
Mhm.
can't just go in to 40 kids' files and pull out seventh grade history and third grade math. Like somebody has to give that to you, right?
Exactly. Yes. And so that's where I need the gen ed teachers to give me the material that I need. So at the beginning of the year, for all of my students who did need adaptations and modifications, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I sent it to the principals and all of the gen ed teachers. And I said, this is what I need from you. Um, and here is what my responsibility is. A lot of the teachers were confused and thought that it was my responsibility to go in and teach content, which
No.
it was not. My responsibility was to, number one, make sure that their content was accessible,
Right.
and then with other kiddos to work on pre-braille skills or whatever pertained to that child, or work on ECC or so. But they thought that I was to teach all of all of the content, which
So if
is
they
not.
assume that if they had a child in their classroom that has a vision impairment, then the obligation is for you to teach them.
Yes,
Okay.
everything.
Well, that would be
Everything.
amazing if you could do all it would be
I
quite busy
know. I
being
wish
there.
I could.
Yeah. So it's kind of talking about the materials, instructional strategies that a student needs. So one of them is braille reading and writing, low vision devices, and abacus, canes, light boards, all those sorts of things. And so I know from the American Printing House for the Blind, vision impairment was the first really federally recognized eligibility in the 1800s, and it's actually the most funded. However, schools have to go in and apply for that grant money as high as, I believe it's as high as $5,000 for each student, because obviously what they need to pay VI teachers and to adapt materials, it just takes manpower, right?
Mhm.
And so were you able to access those funds? Do you know if those funds were reached out for?
So I know that there was a large check that was sent to us from ECR Region 6,
Okay.
and it was allocated for federal funds.
Okay.
I was not allowed to touch that. I never saw the money. I would turn in work orders for things that we needed, like a braille machine or canes, things that the students needed. And all of my all of my orders were either denied or are just in limbo somewhere in the world. Just, I mean, the cane order that I placed back in September has never shown up.
So students that were visually impaired in Bryan ISD were denied canes.
Yes, and in fact, my supervisor said, "Well, just order them on Amazon because Amazon is an approved vendor." Okay, well, Amazon didn't have the right size canes. I could get a cane that was literally taller than the student for them, but they didn't have the appropriate canes for them. So there was, and so they were trying to say that it was an issue of not having the vendor approved because the vendor came from a state that hadn't been approved, or I don't even know what the real excuse was, but no, the students never got new canes. So they were using, broken canes. Some of them didn't have a cane at all. I mean, I mean, they were not getting the things that they needed. I mean, I had a Braille software program that they never set up for me.
So then how can you Braille materials if you don't have the
I
equipment?
can't. I can't. So I mean, I was at home, working at home on my personal Brailler, doing
Okay.
all of the Braille work.
So, and this is just, I mean, it's just so horrific. I'm trying not to say words that I want to say. So here's what I always say. Our kids are never going to get time back. Even if you gave us compensatory time for
Mhm.
these 40 something kids, you've lost time. You've lost progress. So, do you think that has specificity to this eligibility? Or do you think that, I call it, special ed when it's good is the best thing ever. And if you know me, that I will tell you that there's no better setting for kids with disabilities than public school. We get it right. We don't always get it right. But when it's bad, it's so bad. And I know that you're being very respectable and won't tell us, 100 times as bad it was. And we thank you for coming forward. But all of these kids were denied their entire instructional year. Is the district going to reach out and let them know that?
Oh no.
No.
Heavens no. No.
So you spoke up to do the right thing. So when you speak up and when you spoke up in Bryan IC to the right thing, how was that received?
It wasn't received well. I spoke up, I got reprimanded, and then I started to get written up for just completely petty everything. Oh, I switched schools one day because one of my students was out sick, so I went to a different school at the time that I had scheduled, and I didn't put it in my Google Calendar. I'm sorry, I forgot. Like, I'm just like
So you
I
feel like
served the time.
they
They
were
were definitely looking for reasons to
get rid
write
of you
me up. Mhm.
and get rid of you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and ultimately, I mean, this is how school districts work. I've never worked at a school district because you guys all know I'm not credentialed, but every year, right? It's in March or whatever, you get your contract renewed or you don't, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And while you're not FIRED, you're just not renewed, right? And so
Correct.
there aren't God bless vision teachers, but they're not running around in packs of 80.
No.
So ECSC, I mean ESY, early extended school year
Extended
starts
school.
in a couple
Mhm.
of days. So are you going to be working over the summer?
I am not. They
So
said no vision services over the summer.
so I guess
So
every student with a vision impairment
I
must have
guess they can see over the summer. I don't know.
I guess they just blew past all of their goals. So
Yeah, and in addition to that, none of the ECI, early childhood in, intervention, is being seen over the summer.
it's
And I mean, these are my
unbelievable.
babies who I saw last summer that I also never got paid for seeing. So, I
Wow.
mean, they're just, they
We
don't care.
just we just don't care. So when you
Hmm.
talk about, stuff being in a purchase order, and I've had that experience with this district stuff in the purchase order, vortex. Here's the good news. The Assistive Technology Act of 1998 says that we provide assistive technology, whether it's purchased, adapted, whatever, or acquired off the shelf, which means it stops any of that purchase order limbo, right? I mean, I would think if you need a cane, I can't really wait, right?
Yeah, that's
So
pretty necessary.
yeah, it seems to have a brailing machine in the entire district of Bryan ISD would just need to be standard operating procedures, correct?
Correct.
And did you have light boxes for the kids? I mean, there's so many amazing stuff that we have for kiddos with disabilities with a vision impairment. Did you have any of those materials?
I did have some of them. I didn't have a lot of them. So I had some of them, thank goodness for APH, because they sent things directly to me and I was able to
Yeah.
order them without having to, pay for
Oh,
them.
good.
So um I had some things from APH, but they don't do canes. They
Yeah.
don't do a lot of the things that I needed just for. I mean, there were like they denied me glue sticks. I at home I use hot glue guns to make a lot of pictures tactile for the
Yeah.
kindergartner because
Experience,
that's how
experience
he does
boards.
it.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't buy me glue sticks. So I mean, this was all stuff that I ended up just paying out of my own pocket because I mean, I can't not let the child have nothing. I mean, that's wrong. That's just not who I am.
Right. And so I've been working in this district for about 18 years, some successes, some failures, some successes. So the previous VI teacher, who I think was there for a very long
Very
time,
long
very
time.
seasoned, did she take all of her stuff with her, or do you think this is just par for the course in Bryan ISD?
So when I got hired to do this job, it was last May, and I had asked the director if I could shadow the previous VI
Yeah,
teacher.
that would help.
And go meet all the students and all of that kind of stuff. And she said, absolutely. So I went with the VI teacher. She had me pack her office.
Okay.
So she didn't introduce me to any of the
I'm
students.
sorry, what did you just say?
She had me pack her office.
Oh, I didn't know that was part of your job responsibility.
Oh, neither did I. So our district office moved last summer,
Okay.
and she had me pack things up. And so I didn't meet the students. I wasn't told, what I was supposed to be doing. And I got to see just exactly what the situation was that I was getting myself into. And I mean, I went home and I said, I don't know if I can do this because it looked like a hoarder's paradise. We had materials that we will never need. We had things that were older than I was. We had stuffed animals that were covered in mildew and mold.
Oh,
And yeah, so we ended up when I stepped in, I ended up having my husband and my son come down and throw things away that were just not
dangerous.
appropriate and I was never going to use. We didn't have an iPad. We didn't have any iPads for the students. We
Yeah, you
didn't
need them.
have any computers for the students. We didn't have, but we did have, light boxes I was able to get through APH.
Yeah.
Like some low vision things I was able to get through APH, but I mean, we didn't even have a Braille curriculum at the beginning of the year. So it was like we just had nothing.
So this is how, for those of you watching or listening, it is imperative for any student in special education that the last amazing team hands them off to the new amazing team because kids are never paperwork, even if the paperwork's amazing, right? And so it is such a gift. But for children that have this severe of a disability, one of their sensories, maybe two if they're deaf blind, you have to have the last related service provider in at least sit down and go over all 40 something IEPs. Did she sit down and do that with you?
No,
How how did you get
nothing.
that? How did you get
Um,
the
so
IEPs?
eventually I got it after I started my position in August and it was September before I even had access to the IEPs. Like they had to go in and give me access to the IEPs. It was, oh my goodness, it was,
So
yeah.
you haven't sat in anybody's IEP meeting. It's not, you don't even have that knowledge. You're just out there winging it.
I was absolutely winging it. And then I was getting in trouble for not doing it correctly, even
Wow.
though I had no instruction, no guidance.
So, I mean, it's just unacceptable. So, one of the things that we're doing is that in a couple weeks, we're going to have a press conference. So, if you're watching, we certainly want you to join us. Whether anybody likes me or not likes me, I'm going to be a voice for children with exceptionalities. And so, if you want to reach out to us and you want to know about next steps, or if you're interested in getting the state complaint or a federal complaint on these egregious actions, just email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. We'll put it in the link below. What would you like to say, Angela, going, because you've risked it all and I can't thank you. I mean, I don't have a job where somebody can fire me. I just I just feel like sometimes when there's bad school districts, they manipulate their own employees so bad when all you're trying to do is help children, which is the most bizarre thing to me. And so did you see that? Did you see it from the gate? Was it just they didn't like you and your cute brown curly hair?
I don't know because, I honestly don't know, and I'm still just sort of flabbergasted. Like, I just can't believe that this was real. It just seems so unbelievable that how are they doing this to our kids who need it the most, you know? So, I don't know. I don't have
Well,
answers.
if you could say anything to leadership, and what would you want to say to them?
I mean, I just want to say, shame on them. I mean, this district's motto is children first always. And that is not anything that I've seen.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's systemic. It sounds like that, from you and I talked previously several times that these are principals, assistant principals, general ed
Mhm.
teachers, special ed teachers, life skills, resource. And I just don't know with a 50-year-old law how we're still doing it this way. And I think it's because people don't know. And so thank you so much for sharing your story. What I do know is when we give kids resources, they just flourish, right? But if
Absolutely.
you took away my glasses and said, "Yeah, we don't have any budget for that," then I can't access my materials, right? And if you don't have a cane, if you don't have Braille, you've just completely, I mean, you might as well have left them at home. They really would have been better at home. And I think a lot of times for kids with disabilities, because their communications might be a deficit or the way they communicate, it never really gets to the parents, right?
Mhm.
And so, what would you say if parents were watching this right now? What would you want them to know?
So I mean, check on it. I think that, a lot of times the parents are told what people think they want to hear.
Mhm.
And definitely in the case for Bryan ISD, they were telling the parents what they wanted to hear. Oh, he's doing great. He's just thriving.
Yeah.
All of this.
Yeah.
And that's not the reality of it. I mean, what my kindergarten student didn't have a case manager until November.
Yeah. So what about the other, if you can share, and if you can't, that's fine. So we've talked about general educators. So in Texas, only in Texas, do we have related service providers and instructional service providers as it relates to IDEA? They're all related service providers. This must have impacted other related service providers, whether it was speech or OT or O&M or music therapy. Were they like coming alongside Angela and going, "Hey, he needs a cane. Hey, he needs Braille."
No, and so I do have to say that my experience with all the other related providers were they were all great.
Yeah.
They were all doing an amazing job. I believe that the problem was upper leadership. 100%. The problem was upper leadership. And I think because I was sort of the new kid on the block or, the low man on the totem pole, I was the target of upper leadership's frustration, for lack of a better.
And probably for most people, I'm not most people, but once we're told no, that's good. Like once we're
Mhm.
told no and take it down a notch, I think a lot of people would just take it down a notch because they want to keep their jobs, and I would want to keep my job too. And then, like you said, then they use their own time, their own money, their own
Mhm.
resources to make it right. When Bryan ISD hired you to be the VI teacher for the entire district for all of their students, what trainings did they provide you in Vision?
None. All of the training that I have, I came with to the district. It was provided from, the university I attended or my own free time because I like to learn stuff just
Were
in the
they
spare
about
time.
to train you? Were you absent that day?
No, they just didn't even. In fact, I tried to get us some training through Texas School of the Blind and Visually Impaired. We have the best
The
school of the
best.
blind in the country. When I was going to college in Utah, we referred to Texas School of the Blind for everything.
Yeah.
We have the best school at our disposal and so many people willing to help, but it costs money. So
Wow.
unless it was a parent who had an advocate or an attorney, they didn't provide that kind of stuff for that kind of training for the students.
It's a tragedy. It's unacceptable. Well, I'm happy to put a voice and a face to it. So we are going to be doing some filings for sure. I've already have a couple of families that we've talked to. But probably the second week in June, we're going to be doing a press conference.
Mhm.
And so we certainly want you to reach out to us. We want to support all the families. I want to give them a voice. We can only fix what we talk about. If there's somebody that shouldn't be in their position in leadership, then they need to not be in that position as leadership. But the fact that they would spend so much time telling you no, 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 and then write you up. I think you said one time you got written up because you were supposed to be somewhere at 12 and you were there at 11:59. Is that right?
Yes, it was literally that kind of petty write-ups.
And so when you didn't get renewed, do you get, I mean, I don't know how it works. Do you just get a note, you're not getting renewed?
No, so for the last month, I had a weekly check-in meeting with my direct supervisor so that she could, just berate me for an hour every Wednesday. And so at our last one, she said, "Well, would you like me to move you to back to a classroom? Would you like me to move you somewhere else?" And I said, "No, I don't want to work for this school district anymore." And the next week she said, "Okay, we're not going to renew you."
So you couldn't speak up and do what was right in the position that you were in, but they thought you would be quiet in the other room. Was that the thing?
I guess. I
Yeah.
guess, but I just said, "You know what? I can't do this. This is not, it's not a matter of, where if I'll be happy somewhere else. The problem is the district."
Do you think, and people always ask me, and I'm unusual. I'm not like regular people. People often say to me, I'm going to go to a school board meeting. I'm going to call the superintendent. I don't find that that really makes much difference. I find that superintendents are often politicians, and there's nothing wrong with politicians. I find school boards do, say it with me, absolutely nothing. So I never want my client to go and waste 3 minutes of their life standing in front of a school board. I think this modality is much better. But do you think the superintendent knew about this?
I think she did and chose to put her head in the sand.
Okay. And I don't know how it works. Is there HR at school districts? Did you have that resource that you could have gone?
No, no. And I mean, being in Texas, so I don't have a union. I don't have,
Okay.
I don't have any of that kind of support. So I reached out to ECR and to the National Federation of the Blind and to TEA and then to you.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get a voice on this. This has got to be addressed. I always say light does two things: that it exposes and illuminates, and we always need both. So we're gonna put a light on this. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I love special educators, whether they changed my son's life in the 90s, and but all of it matters, right? We need all of those resources. And for a child that's visually impaired, I will always say, whatever meeting I am at, they should actually be leading the team. So if a child has a sensory disability, whether it's vision, hearing, or deaf blindness, that related service provider has to lead the special education team. Otherwise, we're just babysitting them. And I'm not being disrespectful, but I don't know another word. If you're sitting in a class and you can't access the materials, it's babysitting, right?
Mhm.
And schools take, for some kids, they double dip, right? They take federal funds and state funds, and they are obligated to provide a free, appropriate public education, and they're also obligated to be honest. So I would just like to say, on behalf of all the families in Bryan ISD, thank you for coming forward. We appreciate you. We're going to fight alongside of you, and I'm sure there's another amazing district that's going to scoop you up.
I hope so.
Yes. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we conclude?
um, no, but this is, definitely to be continued.
Absolutely. We're going to keep fighting it. And so, even what you said about you're not allowed to contact parents, it's the most
Mhm.
ridiculous thing. I'm sure if my kid was on the football team, all of us
Oh
would be
yeah.
allowed to contact the coach. But how else are parents supposed to support a special education program at home or on the summer on vacation if I don't know what the teachers are doing? But they just didn't want you to expose what they were doing illegally. And so I am so proud of you. I'm so sorry that this happened to you, but more importantly, that it happened to kids. It sounds like it's nothing new in
Mhm.
Bryan ISD. But we're going to reach out to the newspaper stations, radio, and we're going to get some attention on this issue, and hopefully it gets rectified going forward for kids in Bryan ISD. So, Angela, thank you for your time. Remember, you guys, if you need anything, just reach out to us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com, and we will see you guys in the next training.
Thank